Welcome to the History Stories podcast. We love bringing you fascinating, wild stories straight from history each week.
And today, we're definitely diving into one of those. We're embarking on a historic road trip to a small island in Nova Scotia, Oak Island. It's captivated people for, over 2 centuries now?
Absolutely. You've shared this incredible dossier, basically a stack of history books and uncovered sources, all focused on the Money Pit enigma, from that supposed discovery in 1795 right up to today.
Right. So our mission, our historic road trip today, is to navigate through all this material. We want to understand the core of this mystery. What started it all?
Yeah, what sparked this obsession? And after all this time, what have searchers actually found? And maybe the biggest question, why are we still talking about Oak Island?
Exactly. And we've got a lot to work with. Accounts ranging from the very first sort of whispers of discovery all the way to modern high-tech investigations.
It sounds like a story packed with intriguing clues, but also just frustrating dead ends.
Oh, definitely. And a whole cast of characters, all driven by this hope, this belief they're going to uncover some massive secret.
Okay, get ready then. This historic road trip sounds like it's taking us deep.
Hmm.
Buried treasure, maybe ingenious traps, incredible human persistence.
Or perhaps, just maybe, it's nature playing tricks on us all along.
Okay, let's start at the beginning then. The Genesis. The story everyone knows kicks off around 1795, right? Young Daniel McGinnis.
Yeah, the teenager, supposedly, stumbles upon this strange circular depression in the ground.
Under an old oak tree, one with a limb sawed off, and maybe even a tackle block hanging from it.
That's the classic image, yeah. Some versions include the tackle block, some don't. It immediately makes you think pirates, doesn't it?
Especially given Mahone Bay's reputation back then. It was known as a bit of a pirate haunt. Stories of Captain Kidd's treasure were already floating around.
Right. But here's the first, wrinkle. While that image of McGinnis finding this obvious sign is powerful, the actual historical proof from 1795...
It's thin.
It's basically non-existent. We don't have first-hand accounts from that year. The story of the initial discovery really starts to pick up steam much later, mid-19th century.
And often when people are trying to raise money for digs?
Precisely. It often seems linked to fundraising efforts. So right from the get-go, the foundation is a bit shaky. It shows how legends can grow even without solid early proof.
So the bedrock of the whole Oak Island thing is, kind of hazy. And you mentioned variations in those later accounts, too.
Yeah, was it 1795 or 1799? How old is McGinnis, really? Was it a tackle block there or not? The details shift depending on who's telling it.
And linking this to the bigger picture, McGinnis and his friends, John Smith and Anthony Vaughan, they weren't just random kids wandering around, were they?
No, not at all. They were documented landowners, residents in the area around that time, which kind of challenges that whole romantic notion of a deserted, uninhabited island just waiting for discovery.
Right. People were there. It wasn't some untouched mystery spot. Makes you wonder.
It does. Could the initial story, maybe even the first dig attempts by the Onslow Company later, have been embellished? Maybe even fabricated to attract investors down the line?
That's a huge question. Is it a real historical puzzle or something constructed, shaped over time? The lack of solid proof for that first discovery really makes you lean towards the latter, doesn't it?
It certainly plants a seed of doubt. Okay, so let's move forward a few years. The story gets a bit more, shall we say, recorded, even if still debated. Around 1802, maybe 1803, the Onslow Company gets formed.
Led by a Dr. Simeon Linz. And they're basically acting on the stories from McGinnis, Smith, and Vaughan.
That's the idea. They pick up the digging. And they supposedly keep finding those layers of oak logs or platforms at regular 10-foot intervals.
Just like the first group reported, down to 30 feet, then deeper. But then things get weirder.
Oh, yeah. They start reporting layers of charcoal, putty, or clay at different depths, like 40, 50, 80 feet. And then the really bizarre one, coconut fiber.
Coconut fiber at 60 feet down. In Nova Scotia.
Exactly. That's the head-scratcher. Coconuts definitely don't grow there. It strongly suggests maritime activity, maybe packing material, something brought from far away. It just sticks out.
It really does. Could there be any natural way for that to get there, that deep, or does it almost have to be human activity?
It's very difficult to explain naturally. It's one of the most compelling pieces of evidence suggesting something artificial was going on.
And then the big one, the legendary inscribed stone. Found somewhere between 80 and 90 feet down.
Ah, yes, the 90-foot stone. Such a crucial yet frustrating part of the mystery. Because, spoiler alert, We don't have it anymore.
Right, but back then, the Onslow Company supposedly finds this stone with strange symbols carved into it.
And what's fascinating isn't just the claim they found it, but what happened later with trying to decipher those symbols. The translations are all over the place.
You have Reverend Kempton's famous one from the 1940s, 40 feet below 2 million pounds are buried.
Probably the most famous, yeah. But there were earlier reports, back in the 1860s, attributing a translation to a Professor Leakety, 10 feet below 2 million pounds.
10 feet versus 40 feet. That's a pretty significant difference, especially if you're trying to sell shares in a treasure hunt.
Convenient, isn't it? It makes you wonder, was the inscription ambiguous? Or were different versions perhaps circulated to suit the needs of fundraisers at the time?
That 40 feet version definitely feels like it could encourage more digging, more investment. Is there any reason to think the earlier 10 feet one might be more plausible?
It's hard to say without the stone itself. It just highlights how unreliable some of this information can be, passed down through decades, often tied to financial motives.
Okay, so the Onslow Company keeps digging. They hit this inscribed stone, allegedly. And then what?
According to the accounts, they push on, and at about 98 feet, they hit something hard, impenetrable. They must have thought, this is it.
You can just imagine the excitement. They're right on top of something.
But the very next morning, disaster. They come back, and the pit is flooded. About 60 feet of water, salt water.
Ugh. Instant heartbreak. And that's where the booby-trap idea really takes hold, isn't it?
Absolutely. This sudden saltwater flood, combined with later observations that the water levels seemed to fluctuate with the tides. It screamed deliberate engineering, a connection to the sea.
A trap designed to protect whatever was down there.
That became the dominant theory. They even tried digging a second shaft nearby, shaft number 2, to try and get around the water. It flooded too. At that point, the Onslow Company basically ran out of steam, or money, or both. They abandoned the search around 1805.
So by the early 1800s, the core elements are in place. The super deep pit, the weird platforms and materials, the mysterious stone, and now this ingenious water trap.
Exactly. The narrative shifts. It's not just digging for pirate gold anymore. It's a battle of wits against some sophisticated unknown engineer from the past.
That escalating complexity, whether real or perceived, is really key to why this story still grabs us, isn't it?
Without a doubt. Okay, fast forward a few decades. The island sits quiet for a while, but the legend simmers. Then, around 1849, a new group steps up. The Truro Company.
They pick up the torch, re-excavate the money pit, hit the water again. No surprise there. But they have new tech. A pod auger.
Yeah, basically a big drill designed to pull up core samples, to see what's below the flood point without having to drain the whole pit.
And what did the auger reportedly bring up? This is where it gets really juicy, right?
Oh, incredibly tantalizing stuff. They reported drilling through layers of spruce wood, then oak, then hitting metal in pieces.
Metal in pieces, like coins.
That was the immediate interpretation, like drilling through chests filled with gold or silver coins that had maybe decomposed over time, leaving fragments. Then more wood, more metal, then spruce again, resting on clay.
Wow. That sounds like multiple chests stacked on top of each other.
That's exactly how they interpreted it. And adding to the excitement, there's that unconfirmed but persistent claim that the auger brought up 3 tiny links of gold chain.
Just enough to keep the dream alive. But the Truro Company also confirmed the water was salty and tidal, right? Really cementing the booby-trap idea.
They did. And this led them to investigate Smith's Cove on the shore of the island. They believed the flood tunnel originated there.
And they found something there, too.
They reported finding what they called an artificial beach under the normal one. Layers of coconut fiber and eelgrass, which they thought acted as a filter system.
A filter leading to what?
Leading supposedly to 5 stone-lined tunnels, or box drains, that all converged and headed inland, straight towards the money pit.
Wow, they're painting a picture of this incredibly complex system. Underwater tunnels designed specifically to flood the pit.
That was their theory. They tried desperately to stop it. They built a cofferdam at Smith Cove to block the water at the source.
Did it work?
Nope. Failed. The sea just came right through or around it. Then they dug more shafts, shafts 4 and 5, trying to intercept these supposed box drains inland.
Also flooded.
Also flooded. It must have been incredibly frustrating. Their final big effort was another deep shaft. Shaft 6, maybe 109, some say 118 feet deep.
And from the bottom?
They tunneled under where they thought the original money pit bottom was. But disaster struck again.
What happened?
The bottom of the original money pit apparently collapsed downwards into their tunnel. Any chests that might have been there potentially sank even deeper. And, of course,
Their new shaft flooded.
completely. That was the end for the Truro Company. Out of money, out of options, they dissolved around 1851.
So, by the mid-1800s, the legend is fully formed. Deep pit, platforms, charcoal, putty, coconut fiber, inscribed stone, complex flood tunnels from Smith's Cove. It's all there.
And remember the context. Piracy tales are still popular in Nova Scotia. Newspapers are taking off, spreading this incredible story. It captures the public imagination.
But even then, there were doubters. You mentioned that Oak Island Folly article.
Yes, skepticism existed early on. Not everyone bought it. But interestingly, each failure, each setback, seemed to almost reinforce the belief for the true believers.
Like whatever's down there must be really valuable if it's this hard to get.
Exactly. It's a powerful psychological hook. Hope, disappointment, renewed hope. It fuels the obsession. But this obsession started to have a very real and sometimes tragic human cost.
Right. Moving into the 1860s and beyond, the Oak Island Association comes along.
Formed in 1861, they really scaled things up. Multiple shafts being dug, shafts 7 through 11 eventually. They brought in steam-powered pumps, a big deal back then.
Trying to finally beat the water. And they also reported another collapse in the money pit, with the supposed chests sinking even deeper.
That's the story. And there's that strange detail about a yellow keg being ejected during one collapse. Who knows what that was about?
But this period also marks a darker turn, the first recorded death.
Tragically, yes. In 1861, a worker was killed when a steam engine boiler exploded. A stark reminder this wasn't just some adventure story.
A dangerous industrial operation, really.
Absolutely. And despite that tragedy, they pushed on. They even claimed they intersected the flood tunnel on the east side of the pit.
But they still couldn't stop the water.
No, the flooding persisted. Eventually, like the others before them, the Oak Island Association ran out of funds and had to give up around 1864.
Then a brief, unsuccessful attempt by the Halifax Company in 1866, and then the Oak Island Treasure Company in the 1890s, Frederick Blair.
Right. Blair's group used steam pumps again and also boring equipment. They made some really intriguing claims.
Like hitting a vault?
Yeah, they claimed they drilled through a 7-foot thick layer of what they called cement way down deep, between 153 and 170 feet. Analysis supposedly confirmed it was man-made.
A cement vault that deep. What else did they claim?
They also reported recovering a tiny piece of parchment paper from the drill, with just a couple of letters, maybe V or Y, written in ink.
Another tiny, tantalizing clue.
Exactly. And they did an experiment where they poured red paint into the flooded pit and reportedly saw it emerge in the water at 3 different locations on the island shores. More evidence, they thought, for the flood tunnel system.
But again, success was elusive, and tragedy struck once more.
Yes, sadly. In 1897, another worker, Maynard Kaiser, died in a hoisting accident when a rope broke. It's just this grim pattern.
Hope, failure, tragedy, rinse and repeat. Blair didn't find treasure, but he managed to secure the treasure hunting rights for years, right?
He did. He held on to those rights for a long time. Then, moving into the 20th century, 1909, we get the old Gold Salvage and Wrecking Company.
And this is where a famous name pops up.
Indeed. A young Franklin D. Roosevelt was actually an investor and involved with this group.
Wow, FDR. What did they achieve?
They cleaned out the money pit down to 113 feet, sent divers down, but found nothing definitive. Interestingly, the leader, Henry Bowdoin, later became quite skeptical about the whole treasure story.
Huh. Then William Chappell in the 1930s finds some old tools.
Yeah, a miner's pick, an axe, an anchor flute maybe, but their age and connection to any original deposit were uncertain. Could have been from earlier searchers.
And then Gilbert Hedden in the late 30s, inspired by a book.
Inspired by Harold T. Wilkins' book on pirate treasure, Hedden invested heavily, used more modern equipment for the time, found more old timbers, possibly another fragment of the inscribed stone.
And that unverified report about mercury.
Right, mercury residue supposedly found in pottery flasks over in Joe Dre's Cove. Some link this to Francis Bacon theories later on.
Yeah.
Hedden even corresponded with FDR, but ultimately he failed too.
The island just wouldn't give up its secrets, which leads us to the Restall family in the late 50s, early 60s.
Ah, the Restalls. Robert, Mildred, and their sons Bobby and Ricky. Their story is probably the most poignant and ultimately tragic chapter.
They actually moved on to the island, right? Lived there full time.
They did, for years. Lived a very Spartan life, completely dedicated to the search. Found a stone dated 1704, which fueled their hopes.
But then, the terrible accident in 1965.
August 1965, just horrific. Robert, his son Bobby, and two visiting workers, Carl Grazer and Cyril Hills, were overcome by poisonous fumes, likely hydrogen sulfide or carbon monoxide, in a shaft they were working on near Smith's Cove.
All four died. Just devastating.
It was. Two others almost died, too, but were miraculously rescued. This event really cemented the Curse of Oak Island legend.
People started seeing it less as industrial accidents and more as the island fighting back. Supernatural protection.
That interpretation certainly gained a lot of traction. After generations of failure and now this awful loss of life, the curse narrative offered a dramatic, if not entirely rational, explanation.
It's understandable how that idea took hold. But as we move past the Restall tragedy, the approach to searching starts to shift again, becoming more scientific.
And to Robert Denfield, right after the Restall tragedy in 1965-66. He was different. A trained geologist.
And he had a very different approach, didn't he? Less digging small shafts, more massive excavation.
Oh, yeah. He brought in heavy equipment, bulldozers, cranes. He basically obliterated the traditional money pit area, digging a huge crater 140 feet deep, 100 feet wide.
A radical approach. What did he find?
Surprisingly little, actually. Some fragments of old porcelain, but his main contribution was geological.
He assessed the ground itself.
Exactly. And his conclusion was pretty stark. He found no evidence of engineered flood tunnels, no evidence of those continuous oak platforms everyone had reported.
So what did he think caused the flooding?
Natural groundwater, flowing through the porous glacial till the island is made of, and through natural cracks and fissures in the underlying limestone bedrock. He confirmed a natural cavern under the limestone, too.
So a geologist comes in and says, basically, it's probably just nature, challenging that whole complex booby-trapped narrative.
It was a major challenge to the core legend. He left empty-handed, but his work provided a strong natural explanation for many of the island's mysteries.
But the search didn't stop there, did it? The Triton Alliance formed soon after. Dan Blankenship, David Tobias, Fred Nolan.
Right. They continued the search for decades, and they focused on new areas, new techniques. Borehole 10X became a huge focus.
10X. Drilled deep near the money pit area. What was the story there?
They drilled it, then lowered underwater cameras down. The footage was grainy, controversial, but some interpreted images of possible chests, tools, even human remains down there in a large void.
And divers went down.
Divers went down. Reported a large cavern, but visibility was terrible. Dan Blankenship himself had a near-fatal experience during one dive when the shaft started to collapse. Very dangerous work.
They also did more work at Smith's Cove.
Yes. Built another cofferdam. And this time, they found that U-shaped structure made of notched logs. Dated it to around 1769. Also found more coconut fiber, radiocarbon dated this time to the 13th, 15th centuries.
Pre-Columbian coconut fiber, that's wild.
It certainly adds another layer of mystery. And then there was Fred Nolan, working independently on his own lots. He discovered Nolan's cross.
The pattern of 5 large boulders in a cross shape, and that carved stone head.
Exactly. These finds really fueled the Knights Templar and Masonic theories, suggesting ancient symbolism and presence on the island. And through it all, Dan Blankenship's decades of unwavering dedication made him an icon of the search.
Which brings us right up to the modern era. 2006 onwards, Rick and Marty Lagina entered the picture.
And with them, the Curse of Oak Island television show, starting in 2014. That just blasted the story into the global mainstream.
They bought a controlling interest in the main search company, Oak Island Tours, Inc., and brought serious resources and modern tech.
Absolutely. Ground-penetrating radar, sonar, seismic testing, advanced drilling, metal detection, water sampling, professional archaeology.
Yeah.
They've used it all.
And the show has presented a lot of potential finds, keeping viewers hooked, right?
Definitely. Things like that 1652 Spanish coin, fragments of human bone with intriguing ancestry hints, European, Middle Eastern, possibly 17th century.
The lead cross, dated potentially anywhere from the 1300s to 1600s. That rhodolite garnet brooch, maybe 16th or 17th century.
Fragments of leather or parchment. Pottery found incredibly deep, almost 200 feet. Trace amounts of gold and silver showing up in water and core samples.
And those extensive wooden structures they've uncovered, especially in the swamp. The paved area, potential wharves, that ship-shaped anomaly, maybe old roads.
Plus further work at Smith's Cove and the ongoing search for deep tunnels or chambers like the offset chamber. And findings on Lot 5 possibly linked to Sir William Phipps from the 1600s.
The show has definitely kept the mystery alive and generated huge interest. But we have to remember the site itself has been disturbed for over 200 years.
That's the huge challenge now. Distinguishing original deposits from centuries of searcher debris, collapsed tunnels, and natural geological features is incredibly difficult. Reality TV also shapes the narrative, doesn't it?
It certainly emphasizes drama and potential breakthroughs, which leads us to the big question: what is the explanation? We need to unpack the main theories.
Okay, theory number one, pirate treasure, the classic. Captain Kidd, Blackbeard, some other pirate buried their loot.
The evidence is basically the initial legend, Mahone Bay's pirate history, the island's seclusion, maybe some old coins found.
Right. But the problems? No direct historical link to any specific pirate. The alleged complexity seems beyond typical pirate work. Pirate treasure burial is often fictionalized. And that shaky origin story.
Yeah, the pirate theory feels romantic, but maybe not realistic for this specific setup. What about the Knights Templar or Masonic horde?
This one's gained a lot of traction. Idea is Templars smuggled wealth, maybe relics like the Holy Grail or Ark of the Covenant, to Oak Island before Columbus. Masons got involved later, maybe protecting the secret.
Evidence cited includes the lead cross, Nolan's cross, that stone triangle, maybe the old coconut fiber dates suggesting pre-Columbian contact, the sheer complexity of the supposed works.
And definitely the historical interest Masons have shown in the island. Again, problems. Templar voyages to America are speculative at best. Artifact interpretations are debated. The cross-dating map authenticity.
And Masonic involvement could just be later interest in a historical puzzle, not proof of an original connection. It lacks mainstream historical backing.
Precisely. Exciting theory, but built on circumstantial evidence and interpretation. Then there's the Francis Bacon Shakespearean manuscripts theory.
This one feels a bit more out there. Bacon hid the original Shakespeare plays, maybe other secrets?
Yeah, it hinges on the fringe idea that Bacon wrote Shakespeare.
Yeah.
Evidence includes Bacon's interest in codes, the alleged mercury finds, parchment fragments, Bacon's links to Newfoundland.
But the core premise is debatable, and there's no direct link between Bacon and Oak Island construction. The mercury is unverified, the fragments ambiguous.
Right. A fascinating theory for Bacon enthusiasts,
Yeah.
but doesn't hold much water historically regarding Oak Island itself. And briefly, Marie Antoinette's jewels.
Smuggled out during the French Revolution, based mostly on anecdotes and maybe FDR's interest. The garnet brooch is a weak link.
Very weak link. No documentary evidence. Highly speculative. And there are tons of other theories, too. Spanish galleon loot, French or British military payrolls, Viking horde, ancient Egyptians, sunken ships, even just mundane industrial activity misinterpreted.
It's like the theories evolve to match whatever cultural interests are popular and to explain that perceived complexity.
Exactly. But what if the complexity isn't man-made? What if it's nature's deception? Geology versus grand design.
Okay, let's talk geology. The island is limestone and gypsum, right? Soluble rock, karst topography.
Which means sinkholes, caves, underground water flow, or natural features. The money pit itself could easily be a sinkhole that just collected debris over time. Collapses, like the bottom falling out or Shaft 9 collapsing on Sophia Cellars later, are common in karst areas.
And the flooding.
Natural groundwater moving through porous soil and bedrock fissures. Dunfield argued this strongly. No need for engineered tunnels connected to the sea.
Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution studied the water too, didn't they? And found no direct large ocean tunnel connection, just natural seepage making the water brackish.
That's right. And other geologists, like Stephen Aitken, have argued those supposed tunnels are likely just natural karst conduits in the rock. Building stable tunnels by hand through that kind of unstable glacial till would be incredibly difficult anyway.
So even the Smith's Cove box drains might have a natural or simpler explanation, like maybe for early saltworks, using the coconut fiber as filters for brine, or tar kilns.
Plausible alternatives? Skeptics like Joe Nickel conclude. Money pit is a sinkhole. Artifacts might relate to later Masonic activity or even hoaxes. Historian Dan Conlon calls the treasure story pseudo-history.
It's a strong case for natural explanations. Simpler, fits the geology, but then you have those counter-arguments. The non-native coconut fiber deep underground.
The lead cross, potentially pre-Columbian. The human bones with specific non-native ancestries. Those complex wooden structures, like the U-shape at Smith's Cove, seem deliberately built.
So it's this intellectual conflict, simpler geology versus these anomalous finds that hint at a more complex history.
Exactly, and the burden of proof keeps shifting. Now, you could argue those claiming artificial construction need to definitively refute the natural explanations with concrete proof of engineering.
Okay, let's dive into some deep cuts, those lost threads and trivia treasures. The ghost of the 90-foot stone.
Ah, the stone again. Allegedly found by Onslow Co. around 1804. Dark stone, specific size, weight. Supposedly built into John Smith's fireplace, inscription hidden.
Then taken to Halifax, displayed at Creighton's bookbindery around 1865, maybe used as a beating stone, eroding the inscription.
That's the story. Then it vanishes sometime between 1919 and 1933. Crucially, no confirmed photos, rubbings, or tracings exist. None.
So we can't even verify the symbols, let alone the translations. Which brings us back to the cipher debates.
Kempton's 1949 40 feet below translation, based on a later cipher key of dubious origin, versus the earlier 10 feet below, attributed to Professor Lakety, often appearing when shares were being sold.
Highly suspicious timing. Could Lakety have even been involved with creating a new stone for display back then?
It's been suggested. Then you have Zena Halpern trying to link Kempton's cipher to a supposed French Templar document, La Formule. More layers of speculation. Without the original stone, it's all just guesswork.
But we do have those early accounts mentioning a stone with markings, right? Macaulay's 1862 letter, the 1864 Colonist article.
Yes, important primary sources, but again, published during fundraising efforts. Potential bias. Was the story shaped early on to attract money? Very possibly.
And amidst all this, we shouldn't forget Mildred Restall's story. Life on the island, the primitive conditions, the isolation, but also that shared dream.
It's a powerful human story. A reminder of the real sacrifices made in pursuit of this mystery.
Then there are all the other oddities. Those unverified mercury flasks, the 1704 stone, bosun's whistle, iron ruler, Spanish scissors, heart-shaped stone, the stone G.
Miscellaneous artifacts, often with unclear origins or connections, questionable things like Joy Steele's Oak Island idols. It all adds to the noise.
So many lingering questions. What really happened in 1795? Was the stone real? What did it say? Tunnels? Natural or man-made? How do the weird artifacts fit? Did someone find something early on and keep quiet?
And the evidence itself is so fragile. Lost artifacts, contradictory accounts appearing decades later, biased documents. It's a historian's nightmare, but a mystery lover's dream.
Which explains its enduring legacy, how it went from local lore to global obsession.
Print power was huge. Early newspapers, then all those books, Harris, Furneaux, O'Connor, Sullivan, Lamb, Steele, Halpern, Clark, keeping the story alive.
And that Reader's Digest effect, the January 1965 article, that really blew it up for a new generation, right? Including the Leginas.
Absolutely pivotal moment. Then television's glare. In Search Of, back in '79, brought it to TV. But nothing compares to History Channel's The Curse of Oak Island since 2014.
Then its spin-offs. Massive impact. It seeped into pop culture, too. Novels like Preston and Child's Riptide, other fiction, songs, Errol Flynn's interest.
And the internet, the digital campfire. Dedicated forums, websites like OakIslandMystery.com, The Compendium, Oak Island Legend, Reddit's, Oak Island, blogs, YouTube channels, endless discussion.
It's a huge online community dissecting every clue. And it's become a tourist draw, too. Boat tours, the local museum.
Which highlights the commercial incentive now. The TV show, books, tourism, they all benefit from the mystery remaining a mystery.
There's value in the search itself, maybe more than any potential treasure.
Quite possibly. It taps into something deep in us. The lure of the unknown, adventure, lost secrets, human perseverance, our tendency to see patterns and believe in the extraordinary.
So, as we wrap up this historic road trip through Oak Island's layers, you really see why it still grips us. Tantalizing clues, constant failure, tragedy, and just. No definitive answers. It's unique.
Absolutely. Pirates, Templars, bacon, geology, whatever the answer, the money pit and the island's secrets have fueled centuries of searching, speculation, and storytelling. The search itself has created its own rich history.
We hope this historic road trip gave everyone a clearer map of the key events, the theories, the ongoing questions. It's a powerful story about legends, human curiosity, and the pull of the unknown.
So what stands out most to you after this journey? What part of the story do you find most compelling or most puzzling? We encourage everyone listening to keep exploring those history books and uncovered sources we talked about. Form your own ideas. Who knows? Maybe your perspective holds the key to finally unlocking Oak Island's secrets.